So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Tzaielic lineage, so then we can understand the time of the end as per Yirmiyahu the prophet. We find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. As we read it in Yirmiyahu the prophet, we truly understand the importance of revelation regarding then the completion of the spring feast and also the autumn feast. But then the world is going through some very big changes in a couple of sections. Let's then understand, for instance, very simply, the world divided in a couple of sectors. You have then the East and you have the West. Cultures from the world started on the East. But let's then understand further what goes on as far as wars. Once again, the United States has used a particular incident with a few journalists regarding then these new war fronts. It's not only a war, but many war fronts. And the situation is this: we are dealing with a problem that comes from centuries ago, and they were never resolved for very specific reasons. Then this time the United States is leading then this new system of wars. Now let me ask you this, based from an economical viewpoint, what kind of gains can these countries understand these wars will bring? Understandably, we should be concerned with security, obviously, but the problem is, can they later secure a system of security without funding? Let's go forward. Then you have the largest system of the world already taking place. Mostly of the Pacific and East, they are involved with Chinese system and China and the friends of China. While then China places a very tiny portion of their focus regarding war, because they understand it's always non-profitable. But then the West once again wants to impose its ways on the world and also on the Middle East. It is very obvious. You find the Gulf War was a blunt. Then the war against Gaddafi. And unfortunately they did not bring these gentlemen, quote unquote, to justice. They simply destroyed him. Now you have these new war fronts in many nations, such as then France, also bankrupted. You find then Australia being involved in it, sending the boys over there to place their lives on the line. While then the economy also of Australia is not doing very nicely. So wars are very costly. The only situation is, you have these problem with the US because of the Second World War. It is true, it was important of dealing with the Second World War, because then obviously Japan with the problem with the Pearl Harbor and so on and so forth, it was important then for US to enter the war. Understandable. However, the economy back then is not as the same as today. And US has generated a war desire ever since. It's an insatiable desire for conflict and destruction. Sometimes it should be done. At times, such as during this time of the restoration period, where many transitions are taking place, then we should never act as they used to act back then. There is a new player of the system of this world, and it is China. So now let's evaluate these very precisely then. What these wars will bring, other than anger and disaster. Don't we read, for instance, in Ezekiel 37th chapter, the coming of these couple of sons together? You have the son of trade and the son of tabernacling. Is that what then people they fight for, what they believe and what they do? Work versus religion. So then, going forward, what then would be the stance of the Middle East, since they are playing both roles at the same time? They are not going to stop financing these groups, because they understand they are in a position of this time in history, that the authority of trade is returning to them. We are dealing with nations of more than thousands of years of experience. The Creator Himself has made it this way. And only because the West has a modern way of thinking, they think themselves above the law. The laws were obviously abolished. They think themselves higher than the Creator Himself. And that's where they get in trouble. Because these wars are going to be extremely costly. The anger is going to be worldwide. They are dealing with wasps' nests, for instance. They poke around, destroy, and they get everywhere. And it won't work. And there is another problem. The Islamic people, the sons of Ishmael, they are in many parts of the world. And some of them with very nice and clean records. Now, going straight forward and destroying these people at war fronts, don't you think it's going to take some time for these people to recruit these Islamic people in other countries with a clean file then to do the dirty work? Let's move on forward. What the U.S. is going to gain from these war fronts? The question is this. The U.S. has lost the understanding of finishing an objective. They want unending objectives, so then the economy of wars of U.S. then can lift the economy. And the nations were deceived once again. While they are throwing these interminable resources in this situation, then the USD, those people using USD, they are going to pay for these costs. But then, some nations, they simply don't care. Another problem is this. Dragon Mart must be open in Cancun, Mexico. And they are working very diligently. So the Americas then, in a very short near future, as it was then said before, the Chinese system is coming, the Chinese system is coming, and the Chinese system is coming. And a few days ago, it did. And they are on top. Now, when then Dragon Mart starts then its work, the Asian market, or the products of Asia, are coming to the Americas. Let me ask you this then. Understandably, products found then until 5 times cheaper than you would find in the United States at this moment. What do you think is going to cause the economy of U.S.? So we are not dealing only with arms and destroying the Islamic people or these bad people, and some of them did some situations that is trivial in their own land, because we are dealing with cultures. Some nations, for instance U.S., they like to harbor these scoundrels and thieves and murderers. They place them in a hotel. Other countries, they simply eliminate those scoundrels. It's a form of culture. If you go to Northern Africa, if you catch then a person stealing, they simply destroy the person. In some countries, they give another chance, and that person has to go to jail and stay there for some time. And so we are dealing with culture. But the West simply doesn't understand. They want to impose their own ways, or then they say, oh, they should respect our way. The respect of the way simply is providing a pathway in each of those troublesome countries, so then the civilians can be protected. We must use the Quran, the basis of the Islamic people, and do what the Quran states. Firstly, hospitable, understandable, gentle, and kind. If we use force, they are going to be using force beyond. So it's an unending situation. And the US loves this because they can get arms sold and trying to revitalize their industry. And because of this, they wish to control China. And China is not for the grabs. So then, the war Mongols and scoundrels are on their way, and they want war. Let's hope then the people, after these scoundrels they leave the government, can pay for the costs. Not only this, we hope they won't hire those Islamic people with the clean records and then starting then their strikes on their ways, because the West is doing their way, and then later on then the Islamic people are going to do their way, and we know for sure the outcome won't be very nice. It is amazing some of the situations when we read the holy instructions. The Creator himself said, if a person then deals with anger with you, be kind. Because later on the outcome is then a place where it is kind. If you use violence, then you receive more than violence. But as far as we can understand, these countries of the West and these new war fronts, in quote, more than likely, they have a plan of sustaining the expenses of these war fronts. Because one situation is sure, the West won't be able to change the status quo of the trade system of the world. So what is left? A simple question. These countries who are involved in these wars, what can then the traders, those people who are searching for trade and then investment, these countries involved with these airstrikes, what the other nations can invest in them, so secures then a portion of the expenses must be paid in the future? The answer is very simply, they don't have very much. Most of these nations are bankrupt, and they are desperate for control. At the end of it, their system simply won't work. Please stay tuned, much more coming up.